It's already been a record-setting season for the Minnesota Wild. How many records have been broken so far? How many more could the Wild break before it's all said and done? We take a look at that today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild. Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, Locked on Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we look at some of the records the Wild have already broken and some of the records for a single season that they could still break before it's all said and done. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, your veteran captain of the Locked on Wild podcast. Happy to be with you on a Thursday edition of the show. And with the fact that the Wild do not play until tomorrow night, thought it would be kind of fun to take a look at some of the things that have already happened this season in terms of single season records, because they're starting to pile up and there are still plenty that could be broken here before the end of the season with 13 games left to play. So should be interesting to take a look. You're going to hear Kirill Kaprizov's name a lot. I promise you that. But we got a list of the Minnesota Wild single season records courtesy of hockeyreference.com. And so let's just start with the obvious one that was broken a few games ago. That is most points in a single season in Minnesota Wild history. That was 83 by Marian Gaborik. Back in 2007, 2008, Kirill Kaprizov has passed it. He is currently sitting at 87 points and has a chance with 13 games to play. Has a chance to still get to the 100-point plateau, which would be a first in Minnesota Wild history. And it shows you a couple of different things. Number one, just how rare it is to have this type of a player on your roster, the true game breaker that can do everything everything that you could ask for in a franchise player. He is able to do it. And is currently on pace for 103 points. So is expected to get over the 100-point plateau. Also projected for 48 goals and 56 assists. More on those numbers coming up here in a little bit. But Kirill Kaprizov breaking the biggest one with most points in a single season, now his and his alone. May not be the only player that hits that mark before the end of the season is done, because we've got another player on the roster, Mr. Mats Zuccarello, who is rapidly climbing the leaderboard, currently tied with Mikko Koivu at 5th all-time with 71 points this season. He needs 12 points in the final 13 games of the season to break that record again and put himself second all time behind whatever Kirill Kaprizov ends the season with. Zuccarello is projected to hit 84 points this season. So as it stands right now, expected to break it by 1 point. And so that would give the Wilds, just think about how crazy this is. So not only would the Wild have two players that would break that mark, they play on the same line. And so it's a couple of different things. It's eye-opening to me that this franchise has existed since 2000, and that we have yet to have a player score 100 points in the season, and that this Gaborik record, he set it in 2007, 2008. It took 15 years for anybody to break it. Brian Rolston had it at 79 in 05-06, so Gabrick breaking that mark. But like Eric Stahl was the closest to get there in 2017-2018. He had 76 points. So since that time, I mean, Stahl and Mikhail Granlund have come the closest, but Stahl had 76 points, and so he was still 7 points shy of breaking that mark. Mikko Koivu's best season points-wise was 71 in 2009-2010, so he was still well short. Mikhail Granlund's best season was 69 points. Then you have Andrew Brunette, who had the previous record. So Gabrick passing a couple of guys on his way up the leaderboard, but really have only had one season where it came close since Gabrick said it up until this year, and now it might be broken twice. So it does show how things have changed for this team over its existence. You know, it's always been a team that relied on players to kind of elevate the offense, not players who could just do that themselves, like Kirill Kaprizov. And so now that we've seen this happen, maybe a semi-hot take, it won't shock me at all if Kaprizov gets to 100. Let's say he gets to 103 points this year. It's not going to shock me one bit if in 2 or 3 years he breaks it. He's just that kind of player, and as he continues to grow and add more tools to his arsenal, so this could be Kirill Kaprizov could end up with, over the course of his 5-year contract extension, he can end up with the top 2 all-time points in a single season, because that's just, you know, a second-year player. And yes, I know he's a little bit more than a second-year player, but a player in his second season in the NHL at right around 100 points, that's going to rapidly become his floor, what the expectation is for him pretty much any season. You look at it now, and his expectations going forward probably going to be right around 35 goals a year, maybe 40, and somewhere around 50, 60 assists. That's going to be his floor moving forward. And so he could end up topping this list in like 2 years, 3 years. He could do it multiple times because the Wild just have not had this type of player in their history. And, you know, not only has he done that, but he's also made guys like Mats Zuccarello. He's certainly helped him points-wise quite a bit to be able to also threaten to break the mark himself. So that's the big one that has been broken so far, but there are several others that could be broken as well before the season is all done. I do want to say, because I'm sure this is a take, this is a comment that people will mention, and it's one that I agree with as well. Records are great. Ultimately, this season is going to be measured not by the records broken, but by the win-loss record in the postseason. And rightfully so. That's why you play through the regular season, is to get to the playoffs, give yourself a chance to win the Stanley Cup. And so, yeah, these records are great. And the ones that could potentially be broken between now and the end of the year, these records are great, but they don't mean a whole lot if the Wild get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. And I agree with that take, but wanted to just put that in there in the event that it's pointed out before the end of the show. I hear it and I agree with it, but still, it is nice to do a little record shopping, as we like to say. So we'll take a look now at some of the records that still could be broken this season. There are plenty that are in jeopardy of being broken, and so we will take a look at that, plus much more coming up today here on Locked on Wild after this. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, including updates on this week's Masters Championship. See how your favorite players or the players that could potentially break your Masters pool are doing, plus find all of the latest podcasts and reviews for all of the various sports leagues in action this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Gonna come in handy now that Major League Baseball is back in season. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. You can find all of it and more at BetOnline, where the game starts. The Locked On Wild podcast is supported in part by Jake Danielson with First Class Mortgage. First Class Mortgage is your friendly local mortgage company in Maple Grove, Minnesota. If you're looking to purchase a new home, cabin, or investment property in Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, or Florida, give Jake a call today. Plus, if you are a homeowner, now is still a great time for a quick refinance review to see what options are available to help tap into your equity and fund those home improvement projects, consolidate debts, or put cash in your hands. Contact Jake for more info. First Class Mortgage is a local family-owned lender, and best part about it is that Jake does the shopping for you to find competitive rates and programs for all of your home financing needs. With over 700 five-star reviews, Jake at First Class Mortgage will be sure to deliver first-class experience and service for any of your home purchase or refinance needs. Plus, Jake is born and raised here in Minnesota and is a Minnesota sports fan as well. He would be honored to be your mortgage guy too. Contact Jake for a no-cost obligation mortgage review at 763-416-6789 or email him at jake@firstclasscorp.com. That's 763-416-6789. Plus, make sure to mention the Locked On Wild podcast to receive a credit towards a free appraisal. Call 763-416-6789. Some restrictions do apply. First Class Mortgage is NMLS number 322842, and Jake's NMLS is 2055218. This is not an agreement to lock into an interest rate under Minnesota law. First Class Mortgage is an equal housing lender. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Once your first listen of the day is done, make sure that you check out what we have coming at Locked On Sports Minnesota by checking out the Ron Johnson Show. The Ron Johnson Show is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Record breakers. Continuing to look at some of the potential records that could be broken here before the season is done. So we talked about the big one with points for Kirill Kaprizov. Kirill is... At this point, he's going to break all three of the big ones: goals, assists, and points. He is currently 2 goals shy of Marian Gaborik and Eric Stahl's record, which coincidentally was tied 10 years after it was set. And for Gaborik and for Stahl, 42 goals. Kirill is at 40 right now. And with 13 games left, I mean, you heard when we talked about his potential to get to 100 career point or 100 points in the season. He's on pace for 48 goals. So he's going to break it. He needs 2 to tie. He needs 3 to overtake it. And so he's got a 5-goal cushion projected with some very tasty matchups coming up here the rest of the season. So Kirill is going to break it. He's going to finish just shy of 50 goals in his second season in the NHL, which is absurd. And it's, again, as he continues to progress and mature in the NHL, he'll probably break his own record here within the next few seasons. So don't be surprised if Kirill Kaprizov does it and then does it again. Maybe does it again after that, because he's just that kind of player, and these records have stood for a ton of time because of the way that the Wild built their rosters before this last couple of years. Beyond that, The last time that anybody got close was actually Gabrick's original record, which was 38 in 2005, 2006. That same year, Brian Rolston had 34. Zach Parise and Jason Zucker each got to 33, but again, 9 goals short. And so still had a long ways to go to potentially break the goal mark. But Kirill currently 2 shy. That'll fall by the end of the season. The assists record has already been tied by Mats Zuccarello with 50. And Zuccarello has the remaining 13 games to chip in on a couple of Kaprizov goals and reset the all-time assist mark in a season. Interesting note, Kirill Kaprizov currently sits tied for 5th with 47 assists. And so he should as well set this mark and may end up having more assists at the end of the season than Mats Zuccarello does. Zuccarello is pegged for 59. Kaprizov is pegged for 56, according to the latest projections. So actually, Zuccarello will theoretically be a little higher up the ladder, but Kirill should give him a run for it as well. So assists, again, is probably going to fall twice here this season. We talked about points potentially falling a couple of times. Interesting one in plus minus. Alex Goligoski has the record right now. If the season were to end today, he would have the all-time record at plus 37. The previous mark, Ryan Suter, Jason Zucker, both at plus 34 in the 2016-2017 season. The record-breaking year for the Minnesota Wild that ended in a first-round exit. Fun fact. So, plus minus, which plus minus is what it is. If you're on a good team, your plus minus is going to be higher because your team scores more goals than the opponent. So, it's a barometer stat, but I don't look super heavy into it. Nonetheless, it is a record that could potentially be broken here this season. So if Alex Goligoski, now that's the key, is the Wild have 13 games left. If things don't go well, his plus minus will drop. And so then this record will stay intact. If they do go well, it's going to raise. And so then he should be able to kind of hold steady here the rest of the season. It's interesting because he doesn't have a number he's trying to achieve. He has a number he's trying to stay at with 13 games left. So that'll be interesting to see if that one stands by the time the season is done. The way it seemed recently, you'd be surprised with this next one, but penalty minutes. Matt Johnson has the top 3 spots on this list. 201 penalty minutes is the Wild single season mark back in 2002, 2003. At last check, nobody's going to break this one because current leader for the Wild is Marcus Foligno with 110. And Brandon Duhaime has 91. There would need to be, you've got 13 games. So I guess if you average something like 10 penalty minutes a game or 8 penalty minutes a game, whatever the math ends up being, I guess it'd be 90, whatever it is. If you average like 9 penalty minutes a game, then Foligno could theoretically break this, but I don't think that's one that could be broken for a while. And times have changed, but that's one that I was interested to see what the record was, but I don't think that one will be broken here this season. Even strength goals, Kaprizov's currently at 29. The record for the Wild is 30 by Gabrick in 07-08, so that should be broken here this year. Ryan Hartman could also break it. He has 26 even strength goals so far this season. With 13 games to play, they could both break that mark, but Kaprizov will for sure. Now, power play goals is an interesting one because Kirill Kaprizov currently has 11 power play goals, and I believe Joel Eriksson Ek does as well. Brian Rolston has the record for the Wild with 15 in 05-06. Zach Parise has the second highest at 14 in 2013-2014. So if the Wild power play gets on track, you could theoretically see that broken twice. But Kaprizov needs 4 more power play goals to be able to do that. So that one is maybe in danger of being broken here later this year. The one that won't be, and this is fascinating because it seems as though the Wild throughout their history have been a team that has scored shorthanded goals over the course of a season. Wes Walz led the team with 7 shorthanded goals in 2000, 2001. Is there maybe one shorthanded goal that's been scored by the Wilds this season? One, and that was Nico Sturm. I think that's it. Just one shorthanded goal this season. And it doesn't seem like it's something necessary in the arsenal because the Wild have been so good at 5-on-5. But I found that interesting. So that one's not going anywhere. Just a couple more, and then we're going to talk about the wins and points mark for the team. Game-winning goals. Ryan Hartman is close. He's got 6. The all-time record is Marian Gaborik in 02-03, 07-08. Brian Rolston and Eric Stahl also share that mark. So if Hartman gets a couple more game winners, he could break that record too. It just depends because the Wild have certainly had the tendency to move the puck around and get everybody involved. So maybe he gets it, maybe he doesn't. Shots for the team, Brian Rolston, all-time record, 305. Kirill Kaprizov is at 245 right now. So Kaprizov basically needs to average 5 shots a game over the remaining 13, and he'll break the shots mark. Marcus Foligno is going to break the shooting percentage mark because 23.5 is absurd. And so that one will break. And then hat tricks. We've had a couple of hat tricks this year. Rem Pitlick with 1. Matt Boldy with 1. But the all-time record in the season is Marian Gaborik with 3 in 02-03. So that one probably will not be broken either. But nonetheless, a lot of records that could say 2021, 2022 by the time the season is done. Biggest one, though, is wins and team points. So we'll take a look at where the Wild stand amongst their history and what it'll take for them to potentially top 50 wins this year. That and more when we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. And again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Once again, we are free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. So team records for this season. One big one is, of course, wins. The Wild, in their history, albeit a shorter history, have never had a 50-win season. They have a chance to do that here this year. With 13 games left, the Wild needs 7 wins to get to that mark. So they have to go 7-6 the rest of the season. Now, who do they play? You may ask. I tweeted this out before the Nashville game, and so if I jinxed it, I apologize. But the Wild need to now go 7-6 in their remaining 13 games. They play St. Louis twice. They play the Los Angeles Kings. So they go St. Louis, Los Angeles Kings, Edmonton, which is a home game on Tuesday. Then after that, they go at Dallas, San Jose, at Montreal, Vancouver, Seattle, Arizona, Calgary, and Colorado. Vancouver, Seattle, Arizona, Calgary, and Colorado are all at home. There is a St. Louis Blues game in the mix there. I don't remember exactly when that's taking place. But you've got very winnable games. The Kings game, the Oilers game, San Jose, Montreal, Seattle, Arizona, all games that the Wild should be able to win right off the bat. So you add those to the mix already. That's 5 games, 6 games with the Montreal game. So should win those. So you throw those 6 wins in. The rest of the games is where it gets tricky because Vancouver at home should be able to win that game. Do you maybe split between Calgary and Colorado in those final couple of games? Colorado will have everything locked up by that point. So will they rest players? Will Calgary be locked in as the top in the Pacific? Will they rest players? Those could be 2 opportunities for the Wild to snag some wins as well. So then you're up to 8. The rest of the schedule at Dallas is going to be tricky. At St. Louis twice is going to be tricky. So as it stands right now, the Wild have a very good shot at breaking that all-time wins record and getting to 50 by the end of the season, which would give them as well the most points in a single season. Some other team goal records that could be broken this year. Most goals in a single season, 262. That or 263. That was the previous win record of 49 back in 2016-2017. The Wild had 263 goals that season. The Wild currently, with 13 games to play, have 254 goals. So they are going to shatter the mark for goals in a single season. They could get to 300, depending on if they average between 3 and 4 goals per game the rest of the way. So the Wild could very easily have themselves with a new franchise leader in points in a single season, a new goals mark, a new assists mark, a new wins mark, a new points mark, amongst many other things. And this circles back to the point that I made in segment 1. All of these are great. All of these marks are impressive. They're great. And they give you something to circle back to this season, 2021-2022. Circle back to the first full season after COVID-19 and a way to commemorate everything that the Wild were able to do this season. But if the Wild get them all, they get to 50 wins, get the 2 seed, play St. Louis, none of it means a thing if they get swept in that first round. We already had the previous record-breaking season in 2016-2017. How'd that work out? So records are fun, and this was meant as a way to kind of take a look at what we've done so far this season, celebrate it, but then realize there's a lot of work to be done left. That starts on Friday against the St. Louis Blues. We'll talk more about that game on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Wild, and we'll take a look at the playoff picture for the Western Conference. See what is going on, where people are at, who's playing well, who isn't. We'll size up the Western Conference playoffs as well on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Wild. But that is going to do it for today's episode. So once again, now that your first listen of the day is done, make sure you head over to Locked On Sports Minnesota and check out the Ron Johnson Show, which has new episodes every Monday through Friday and is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Just like Locked On Wild, we are available wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are available free of charge. We're available anytime you feel like listening. So if you're catching us on the ride back from work, happy to have you along, and continue to check out our newest episodes by hitting the subscribe button and turning your notifications on so that you get notified when we have new episodes coming out. We are keeping you as up to date on all things Minnesota Wild as we possibly can, with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.